When the pages of history whisper of tyrants, few names chill the soul like Herod the Great. Behind the peaceful image of Bethlehem, the glowing star, the angelic song, the promise of salvation, hides a shadow no one likes to remember. A man who ruled not by wisdom, but by fear. A king whose throne was built on corpses, whose heart was consumed by paranoia, and whose cruelty reached its peak in an act so monstrous that it scarred the very story of Christmas. He was a monarch crowned by Caesar, but rejected by heaven. A ruler who tried to silence prophecy with blood, and yet the child he hunted would outlive him and change the world forever. This is the rise, the madness, and the downfall of Herod the Great. Herod was not born into divine destiny. He came from Edom, a land long marked by its enmity with Israel, descendants of Esau, not Jacob. To the Jewish elite, that made him an outsider, a pretender to the sacred throne of David. His father Antipater was cunning, a political survivor who knew how to serve Rome's ambition and use it for his own gain. When Roman generals conquered Judea, Antipater quickly aligned himself with them, trading loyalty for authority. Herod grew up watching this, learning that power wasn't inherited, it was seized. At 26 years old, he became governor of Galilee, a land of constant rebellion. When bandits challenged Roman authority, Herod crushed them without mercy. The executions were swift, public, and cruel. The Jewish council protested, but Rome applauded. In Herod, the empire saw a man who could rule with an iron hand, but to his own people, he was a stranger sitting on David's throne, half Jewish by law, fully Roman by spirit. And that wound, that constant rejection, would grow into the paranoia that defined his reign. Rome's civil wars reshaped the world, and Herod played them like a master gambler. He backed Mark Antony when Antony ruled the East, showering him with gifts, pledging undying loyalty. But when Antony fell and Octavian Augustus rose to power, Herod switched sides overnight. He crossed stormy seas to kneel before Augustus himself, uninvited, unarmed, but utterly fearless. He said, "I was loyal to Antony, and I will be loyal to you in the same way." Augustus admired his boldness. He confirmed Herod as king of the Jews, granting him new lands and wealth. Yet beneath the royal title was humiliation. His crown came from Rome's hand, not from heaven's. He wore it proudly, but every glance from his people reminded him, "You're not one of us." He ruled with the discipline of a Roman general and the insecurity of a rejected child. To Caesar, he was a puppet. To Judea, a traitor. And to himself, a man desperately trying to prove he deserved the throne he had stolen. Herod's heart was a battlefield, part ambition, part madness. In his pursuit of legitimacy, he married Mariamne, the Hasmonean princess, descendant of priestly kings. She was everything he wasn't: noble, loved, and pure-blooded. But Herod's love soon turned to obsession. He couldn't possess her heart, so he sought to control her life. When he went to war, he left orders that if he died, Mariamne must die too. That's not love, that's fear in its most dangerous form, the fear of losing control. Soon jealousy took over. When her brother Aristobulus became high priest, the people celebrated him as a hero. Herod saw him as a rival. In a grotesque act masked as celebration, the young priest was drowned in a pool by Herod's men. When the rumors reached Mariamne, her heart turned to stone. Herod, desperate for her affection, was met only with disgust. He accused her of betrayal and had her executed. But after she was gone, he lost himself. He would call her name in the night, talking to her ghost, wandering his palace like a man already damned. The disease of paranoia spread. Two of his sons, Alexander and Aristobulus, were accused of plotting against him. They too were strangled. Even the Roman Emperor Augustus could only shake his head and say, "It is better to be Herod's pig than his son." In Herod's palace, silence was safety, loyalty was survival, and love was a death sentence. To mask the blood on his hands, Herod turned to stone. He became a builder of empires, carving his name into the land of Judea. He built Masada, a fortress perched atop cliffs that seemed to scrape the sky. He built Herodium, a mountain reshaped by his will, a literal tomb for his pride. And he built Caesarea, a glittering port city, his tribute to Rome, not to God. But his grandest work was the Temple of Jerusalem. It was colossal, a project of divine scale. White marble gleamed under the sun, golden walls
reflected light like fire. Even his enemies had to admit, whoever has not seen the temple built by Herod has never seen true beauty. But beauty has a cost. Behind the shining stones were thousands of enslaved laborers. Farmers were taxed into poverty. Priests were hand-picked by Herod to serve his politics, not their faith. The holy city became his stage, the temple his tool. Herod ruled not just bodies, but souls. He replaced reverence with control, turning worship into obedience. And yet, no matter how high he built, the shadow of his own insecurity loomed higher still. Every stone he laid was another wall between himself and the God of Israel. Then came the night that would define him forever. Wise men arrived in Jerusalem, following a star. They asked, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" For Herod, those words were poison. He had fought his whole life to be called king, and now a baby was born with the title by birthright. Pretending to be pious, Herod said, "Go find the child and bring me word that I too may worship him." But his worship was murder. When the Magi never returned, Herod's rage erupted. He sent soldiers to Bethlehem, ordering them to kill every male child under the age of 2. The sound of armored boots, the cries of mothers, the silence of infants. That night, the streets ran red, not with rebellion, but with innocence. Prophecy was fulfilled. Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted. The tyrant had declared war not against men, but against God himself. Yet divine providence prevailed. Warned by a dream, Joseph and Mary fled to Egypt, carrying the infant Christ beyond Herod's reach. The man who tried to erase the light only confirmed its arrival, because every drop of blood shed in Bethlehem became a testimony that evil fears what it cannot control. The years that followed brought Herod no peace. His body began to rot as his soul already had. He suffered from unbearable pain, his flesh eaten by disease, his mind consumed by guilt and hallucinations. Servants avoided his presence. His palace, once filled with power, became a tomb of terror. Still, he feared being forgotten. Knowing the people would celebrate his death, he ordered his soldiers to execute hundreds of Jewish leaders upon his passing, so the land would mourn. But mercy at last defied him. That command was never carried out. In 4 BC, Herod died screaming, alone, diseased, and hated. A man who once ruled a nation now ruled only his own torment. His death was not quiet, it was judgment. The same disease that consumed his body was the reflection of the corruption that had devoured his soul. Centuries later, Herod's buildings crumble under dust and time. Masada's cliffs echo only with the wind. The temple he rebuilt was destroyed long ago, and yet one thing endures: the warning his life became. Power without purpose leads to ruin. Control without compassion breeds monsters. Herod's name survives, not in honor, but in infamy, a monument to the madness of pride. He sought to make himself eternal, but it was the child he tried to kill who became eternal instead. In the end, there were 2 kings in Judea. One ruled from a marble palace, wielding fear like a sword. The other lay in a manger, wielding love like a weapon. One sought to build a kingdom of stone. The other came to build a kingdom of souls. Herod's empire fell to dust. His kingdom still changes lives, because darkness, no matter how deep, can never overcome the light.
So when you hear the story of Bethlehem, remember this: even as tyrants plot and empires rise and fall, the truth of God's plan never dies. If this story moved you, share it, because every generation needs to remember that in the darkest moments of history, the light still wins.